one night of love with the Apache, but he returned to claim her heart years later. Maria had always lived a quiet life in her small town, nestled between rolling hills and wide-open plains. Life was simple there. Days passed with the predictable rhythm of work, family, and the occasional visit from neighbors. Her family ran a small bakery that had been in their hands for generations, and Maria spent most of her time helping her mother knead dough, fill pastries, and serve regular customers who had been coming for years. Despite the simplicity of her life, Maria had a curiosity about the world beyond her town, and she often imagined stories of places she would never visit and people she might never meet. One evening, the town was alive with excitement. A traveling fair had come, a rare event that brought performers, games, and music to the quiet community. People from surrounding areas arrived in wagons and on foot, filling the streets with laughter and chatter. Maria's mother had allowed her to go, promising that she would return before dark. It had been months since Maria had attended a fair, and she could hardly contain her excitement. The lights twinkled in the evening air, music floated from the central square, and the smell of roasted nuts and sweet treats made the night feel magical. As Maria wandered through the fair, her eyes scanning the colorful stalls, she noticed a man standing a few steps away. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen in her town. He had the tall, strong posture of someone used to traveling long distances, and his dark eyes seemed to hold stories no one had told. His clothing was different from everyone else's, simple yet unique, adorned with patterns and symbols Maria did not recognize. There was an air of calm confidence about him that made it impossible to look away. Curiosity drew her closer. Their eyes met, and for a moment the crowd around them seemed to disappear. Maria felt a strange pull in her chest, a feeling she had never experienced before. The man smiled gently, and it was as if he had been waiting to see her there. He introduced himself in a soft voice, explaining that he was visiting from far away and belonged to the Apache tribe. Maria listened with fascination, asking questions about his life, his travels, and the lands he came from. His answers were honest and filled with simple wisdom, and Maria felt herself drawn into a world she had only imagined. They spent the evening together, walking through the fair, sharing small bites of food, and laughing at the silly games around them. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Maria noticed how he paid attention to the smallest details, the way her eyes lit up when she saw a colorful ribbon, or how she hesitated before trying something unfamiliar. There was a kindness in him that made her feel safe, even though they had just met. It was a connection that defied words, something that went beyond explanation. As the night deepened, the fair began to empty, but neither of them wanted the moment to end. They found a quiet spot near the edge of the town, where the stars were bright and the cool night air carried the scent of distant flowers. There, they shared stories of their childhoods, of dreams they had yet to fulfill, and of the lives they had lived so far. Maria told him about her family, her work at the bakery, and her simple pleasures in life. He spoke of the open plains, of journeys through forests and rivers, and of the traditions of his people. Each word they shared built a bridge between their worlds, a connection that felt both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. Eventually, the moment of silence came. They looked at each other without speaking, feeling the weight of the night and the intensity of their feelings. Maria had never believed in love at first sight, yet she could not deny the emotions swirling inside her. The man reached out gently, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, and she felt a sense of comfort and belonging she had never known. Under the stars, with only the soft sound of the wind around them, their hearts connected in a way that words could not capture. It was a night filled with unspoken promises, a night where time seemed to stop, allowing them to live in a world of their own. They walked through the empty streets, hand in hand, not caring about the future or what the next day might bring. For Maria, it was the first time she truly felt alive, as though her heart had been waiting for this encounter without knowing it. The world beyond her town seemed closer, and the life she had imagined in stories suddenly felt within reach. Yet as dawn approached, reality crept in. He had to leave, as his time in the town was limited. They both knew this encounter could not last, that the world around them would demand its rules. He promised only that he would remember her, that this night would remain in his heart, as it already had in hers. Maria tried to hold on to the feeling, to the warmth and the excitement, but as the first light of morning touched the rooftops, he disappeared, slipping away into the waking world like a dream fading at sunrise. Maria returned home, her mind replaying every detail of the night. She could still feel his hand in hers, hear his voice softly explaining the wonders of the places he had seen, and see the intensity in his eyes that seemed to look straight into her soul. She tried to resume her daily life, yet everything felt different. The bakery smelled the same, her family greeted her as usual, but Maria carried a secret spark of memory that made every day seem both heavier and brighter. She did not know if she would ever see him again, yet she knew that her life had changed forever because of that one magical night. In the following weeks, Maria found herself walking through the town with a new awareness. Simple things reminded her of him: the flutter of a bird in the morning, the pattern of clouds in the sky, the distant sound of a drum. She began keeping small mementos of that night: a feather he had given her, a tiny charm from his belongings, and a folded note he had written and handed her before leaving. These items were her anchors, tangible pieces of a memory that had already begun to shape her heart. Even though the encounter had been brief, Maria realized she had learned something important about herself. She discovered that connections could be instant, yet deep, that love could arrive unexpectedly, leaving its mark even in the absence of permanence. And although she did not know if she would ever see the man again, she carried hope quietly, knowing that life had a way of bringing unexpected surprises. As the seasons changed, Maria often returned in her mind to that night under the stars. She remembered the way the moonlight had caught in his hair, the way his eyes had held hers, and the gentle strength in the way he had spoken. Every memory was vivid, more real than she could explain. Friends would sometimes ask about her thoughts, and she would smile, keeping the memory secret in her heart. It was her story, a private treasure that gave her comfort, excitement, and a touch of longing. Maria understood that life would continue, that days would pass, and that she had responsibilities to meet. Yet, in the quiet moments at night, walking through empty streets or sitting alone in the bakery after work, she felt that spark of magic again. It was a feeling that could not be measured by time or distance, a connection that remained alive even in absence. And as she looked up at the stars each night, she often whispered a silent wish, hoping that somehow, somewhere, he too remembered that night. Though the man had left her town and returned to his life far away, Maria's heart had already recognized something rare and precious. That night had changed her. She had discovered love in its purest, simplest form, a love that arrived suddenly, illuminated her world, and left an impression that would remain forever. And so, Maria continued with her life, carrying the memory of one night under the stars, one night of shared laughter and quiet understanding, and one night that had awakened her heart to the possibility of something extraordinary. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that some connections were too deep to be forgotten, no matter how much time passed. That night, magical and fleeting as it was, had become a turning point in her life, a story she would remember forever. Time moved on, but Maria's heart did not forget. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, yet the memory of that night under the stars remained vivid in her mind. Life around her continued as usual. The bakery flourished with her family's care, neighbors continued to stop by for fresh bread and pastries, and the town itself remained the quiet, familiar place she had always known. Yet, Maria lived in a strange balance between the ordinary and the extraordinary. She moved through her daily routine with efficiency and grace, yet every quiet moment seemed to bring her back to the memory of the man she had met that night, the Apache who had disappeared as suddenly as he had arrived. She tried to immerse herself in her work. The bakery was demanding, with ovens to manage, dough to knead, and customers to serve. At times, Maria felt almost grateful for the distraction. Work gave her a rhythm, something she could control, unlike her feelings for the man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. Still, even amid the busyness of the bakery, her mind would wander. She would recall his voice, low and steady, sharing stories of distant lands. She would remember the gentle warmth of his hand, the intensity of his gaze, and the way he seemed to notice the smallest details about her. These memories were like threads woven into her daily life, invisible to others but forming a fabric of longing within her heart. Friends noticed a change in her. Maria had always been cheerful, the kind of person who could brighten a room with her laughter, but over time she became quieter, more reflective. When asked about love or relationships, she would smile politely and change the subject. It wasn't that she refused love. She had simply known a connection so intense, so rare, that ordinary affection felt dull in comparison. Deep down, Maria understood that part of her heart remained reserved for someone who might never return, yet she couldn't help but hope. That hope was quiet and fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind, yet it gave her strength to carry on. She also began noticing how the world reminded her of him. A traveler passing through town, wearing patterns similar to his, would catch her eye. A bird flying across the evening sky, or the smell of distant pine and smoke from the hills, would stir memories she could not shake. Maria sometimes laughed softly at herself for being so affected by a single night, yet she could not deny the power of what had happened. That brief encounter had opened her heart in a way she had never known. It had taught her to feel deeply, to see beauty in small moments, and to value connections beyond time and circumstance. Despite the longing, Maria's life moved forward. She focused on her family, helping her mother expand the bakery, training younger helpers, and occasionally assisting at the local school with baking classes. She formed friendships, attended town gatherings, and celebrated festivals, but there was always a quiet space within her that belonged solely to the memory of him. That night had left a mark too profound to fade. Sometimes, Maria would take out the small tokens she had kept, the feather, the tiny charm, and the folded note he had given her. She would hold them in her hands, remembering the warmth of his touch and the way he had made her feel truly seen. These small objects became treasures, reminders that life could bring magic even in brief, fleeting moments. As years passed, Maria experienced milestones like any young woman. She celebrated birthdays with friends and family, watched her younger siblings grow, and even began to dream of traveling herself. Yet, the longing for the Apache man never diminished. It was as though part of her heart was suspended in that single night, waiting for him to return. At times, she felt a pang of sadness, thinking he might have forgotten her, that the intensity they shared could never exist in his world beyond her town. And yet, a quiet hope remained, a hope that the bond they had shared was not easily broken by distance or time. Maria also learned patience in a way she had never known. Life often demanded compromise and resilience, and she found herself growing stronger as she navigated her responsibilities. Yet, the memory of that one night gave her comfort, reminding her that not all lessons of life were harsh. Some were gentle, tender, and beautiful. She often thought about what he might be doing, where he might be, and whether he too remembered the night under the stars. These thoughts were bittersweet. They brought both joy and longing, but they shaped her understanding of love as something that could survive absence, something that was resilient even when unspoken. Friends and family sometimes encouraged her to move on, suggesting that she could never wait forever for someone who might never return. Maria would smile, understanding their concern, but she could not deny her feelings. She knew that some connections were unique, impossible to replace or forget. It was not just a fleeting crush or attraction. It was a bond that had touched the deepest part of her soul. She quietly resisted the pressure to dismiss it, believing that life had a way of bringing people together at the right moment. In the meantime, Maria allowed herself small joys that reminded her of hope. She would spend evenings walking along the hills near her town, imagining the paths he might have walked, or watching the stars and recalling the clarity of that night. She wrote in her journal, carefully documenting her feelings and memories, ensuring they were not lost to time. Through these practices, Maria nurtured her heart, keeping it open despite the uncertainty of the future. It was an unusual kind of patience, not passive waiting, but an active cultivation of memory, hope, and emotional resilience. Sometimes, unexpected events would stir her emotions even more. A traveling performer passing through town, someone who shared a piece of music from the lands he had described, would make her heart race. Or a distant festival with traditional dances and music similar to what he had told her about would make her recall his stories vividly. These moments were both painful and beautiful, reminding her of what she had experienced and what might one day return. It was as if life itself was keeping her memory alive, preparing her for the possibility of reunion. Maria also grew wiser in understanding herself. She realized that her life could be fulfilling even without him, but that did not diminish the love she carried. She learned that love could exist as both a memory and a hope, as both a lesson and an aspiration. That night had shown her the depth of human connection, the power of presence, and the significance of fleeting moments. She understood that love was not just about being together every day, but about being touched, changed, and inspired by someone's presence, no matter how brief the encounter. Despite her careful emotional management, Maria occasionally felt loneliness. Some evenings she would sit quietly, imagining his return, imagining the stories he would tell, imagining the way their lives could intersect once again. These thoughts were not despairing, but rather a tender longing that kept her heart alive and alert. It was a quiet, enduring love, one that neither diminished over time nor demanded immediate fulfillment. It was a love that taught her patience, resilience, and the beauty of waiting with hope rather than fear. As years rolled by, Maria often reflected on the fleeting nature of time and the power of memory. She saw young couples in the town, heard their laughter, and recognized the intensity of feelings that could arise in a single night. She understood that what she had experienced was rare and precious. She held it carefully, protecting it from the ordinary pressures of life while allowing it to enrich her own existence. That night with the Apache man had been brief, yes, but its impact on her heart was lasting, shaping how she viewed love, relationships, and even herself. Maria had learned to accept that life might not always provide closure or clear answers. She did not know if she would ever see him again, and she did not expect it, yet she had hope. It was hope born not of fantasy, but of faith in the connection they had shared. She believed that true bonds were resilient, capable of surviving distance, time, and circumstance. Her life continued, full of ordinary routines, family obligations, and community responsibilities, yet within her existed an extraordinary memory that remained alive, a private sanctuary of love, hope, and anticipation. Through all of this, Maria carried herself with grace, kindness, and quiet confidence. She helped others in her town, shared laughter with friends, and contributed meaningfully to her family's bakery. But when she was alone, she allowed herself to remember, to dream, and to hold space for the one who had left an indelible mark on her heart. It was not obsession but reverence, a recognition that some people, even if briefly present, can change the way we see the world and ourselves forever. And so, Maria lived her life, carrying both the ordinary and the extraordinary, the everyday routines and the memory of that magical night. She knew that love could arrive unexpectedly, leave its mark, and endure silently, waiting patiently for the right moment to return. The years taught her strength, patience, and hope, and in the quiet moments, she often looked to the horizon and whispered a silent wish, hoping that one day, the story of that night under the stars would continue, as she believed it one day must. Years continued to flow quietly, bringing with them changes that Maria could not always control. The town itself seemed almost frozen in time, yet her own world had grown more complex. Maria had learned to move through life with a careful balance between responsibility and hope. The bakery continued to thrive, and she had become an expert at her work, managing daily operations with skill and patience. She had also taken on new challenges, teaching younger apprentices, experimenting with recipes, and even helping her mother plan small expansions of the business. Life was busy, fulfilling, and yet, at its heart, there remained a quiet emptiness that no success could completely fill. That emptiness was a reflection of the night she had shared with the Apache man. Maria thought about him often, imagining where he might be, what he might be doing, and whether he had ever thought of her. The memory of his presence was vivid, his voice, calm and warm, telling stories of distant lands, the way he looked at her as if he could see her very soul, and the gentle yet firm way he had held her hand under the stars. Even though years had passed, those memories did not fade. They had become a part of her, a hidden layer of her existence that she carried silently but proudly. Maria occasionally allowed herself small indulgences in memory and imagination. On quiet evenings, she would walk along the hills that bordered her town, letting the wind brush against her face as she recalled their night together. She would picture the wide open plains he had described, the campfires he had spoken of, and the patterns and symbols that adorned his clothing. In her mind, she walked alongside him once again, listening to his stories, sharing laughter, and feeling the warmth of a connection that time could not erase. These moments were both comforting and painful, a bittersweet reminder of something extraordinary that had entered her life only briefly. Her friends sometimes noticed her reflective nature and would tease her gently, asking if she was thinking about love or romance. Maria would smile, offering a vague answer and quickly shifting the conversation. She knew that explaining her feelings would be impossible. How could she describe a connection so deep that it existed in absence, in memory, and in hope? The Apache man had become more than a fleeting love. He had become a symbol of possibility, of a world beyond the ordinary, and of a kind of love that could not be rushed or forced. It was a private joy she guarded carefully, allowing herself to dream without fear of judgment. Despite the quiet longing in her heart, Maria learned to find joy in ordinary moments. She celebrated small victories at the bakery, enjoyed laughter with her family, and shared warmth with neighbors. She found herself appreciating life in ways she had never understood before. That one night had shown her the intensity of emotion that could exist in even a brief encounter, and it had taught her to notice the beauty in everyday experiences. The sound of children playing in the street, the colors of the evening sky, the smell of fresh bread, all of these small things became richer, more meaningful because she had felt something extraordinary once. Over time, Maria began to grow in understanding herself and the world around her. She realized that waiting for someone did not mean stagnation or sadness. It could mean hope, patience, and a quiet, steady faith that life had its own timing. She cultivated her dreams, pursued new experiences, and built relationships with people who supported her growth. Yet, always in the back of her mind, the memory of him remained, like a lighthouse guiding her through the uncertainties of life. It was not an obsession, but a presence, a reminder that love could endure even in separation, and that some connections were too deep to be broken by time or distance. Maria also began to notice how the world subtly reminded her of him. Travelers passing through town, patterns of clothing, even the distant sound of drums during a festival, each small detail brought her back to that night. She would pause, close her eyes, and imagine his presence, recalling the way he had spoken, laughed, and looked at her. These moments were fleeting yet powerful, like echoes of a dream that refused to fade. They reminded her that life could be full of surprises, that connections could exist across years, and that love was not always about proximity. Sometimes, it was about memory, patience, and faith. Even in the midst of her longing, Maria continued to grow emotionally. She became more empathetic, noticing the small struggles and joys of those around her. She listened to friends with patience, offered advice with understanding, and treated even strangers with warmth. It was as if the intensity of her own experience had expanded her heart, making room for love and care that was broader than herself. Yet she knew that part of her heart would always belong to that night, to the Apache man who had arrived and left so suddenly, leaving a mark that could never be erased. Life also brought her small joys and surprises. A letter from a distant relative, a visitor sharing a story from another town, or a festival featuring music she had never heard before. Each experience carried the possibility of reminding her of him. Maria cherished these moments, letting them fill her with hope rather than sorrow. She understood that life was unpredictable, and that sometimes joy and love appeared when least expected. It was a lesson she had learned the hard way, but it shaped her resilience, her patience, and her ability to find beauty in both memory and reality. There were moments of loneliness, of course. Maria sometimes felt the ache of absence, imagining what life might have been like if he had stayed, if circumstances had allowed them to be together. She felt the weight of time passing and the fear that perhaps he had forgotten her. Yet, she also felt a quiet strength. The connection they had shared had been real, and its memory had the power to sustain her. She understood that love was not only about being together physically. It was about recognizing someone's presence in your life, allowing it to shape you, and carrying it forward with dignity and hope. In her quieter moments, Maria would often take out the feather, charm, and note he had left her years ago. Holding them in her hands, she would close her eyes and recall the details of that night. The way he had smiled, the calmness in his voice, and the way they had shared an understanding without needing many words. Each item was a small treasure, a tangible connection to a memory that had become an essential part of her life. She treated these mementos with care, knowing that they represented something rare and precious, a love that had arrived unexpectedly and had lingered quietly for years. Maria also began to understand the difference between fleeting desires and true connection. She met other people over the years, shared conversations, and even felt sparks of friendship or admiration, but nothing could match the depth of what she had experienced that night. She realized that not all relationships were meant to last forever, yet some connections left permanent impressions. That night had taught her that love was not simply about being together. It was about presence, impact, and the ability to transform your understanding of yourself and the world. Through all these years, Maria learned patience and faith. She knew that life had its own rhythms and that sometimes extraordinary things happened in their own time. Her hope for the Apache man's return was quiet, almost invisible to those around her, yet it was steady and unwavering. She had learned that love could endure absence, that memories could keep a heart alive, and that time, while challenging, could not erase the intensity of a connection that had been genuine and profound. The years also taught her gratitude. She was grateful for the memory itself, for the way it had expanded her understanding of love, and for the lessons it had brought into her life. She was grateful for the moments of joy, the quiet evenings walking under the stars, and the ability to carry hope without losing herself. Maria understood that some experiences were rare, and that recognizing their value was part of living fully. And so, Maria continued her life with a careful balance, tending the bakery, helping her family, engaging with friends and the town, and holding space for the extraordinary memories she carried. Each day she grew stronger, wiser, and more resilient, yet always attentive to the quiet voice of her heart that remembered him. She understood that love was patient, enduring, and sometimes silent, and she embraced that truth fully. Even as ordinary events occurred around her, the changing seasons, the festivals, the laughter of neighbors, and the simple pleasures of daily life, Maria's heart remained ready. It was ready for the possibility of reunion, for the return of the one who had left such an enduring mark on her soul. Though years had passed, she did not feel despair. She felt a quiet confidence that some bonds were too strong to be broken by distance or time. The memory of that night under the stars was not a burden but a guide, reminding her of what was possible and inspiring her to live fully in the present while holding hope for the future. And so, Maria's life unfolded, rich with ordinary details, yet colored by the extraordinary memory of a love that had touched her heart deeply. She moved forward with grace and resilience, carrying the hope of reunion in her chest, allowing it to shape her understanding of love, life, and the power of connections that transcend time. That memory remained a quiet flame within her, steady, patient, and bright, lighting her path through the years, waiting for the moment it might finally be rekindled. Life had continued its quiet rhythm for Maria as it always did, yet she felt a subtle shift in the air one late afternoon. It was a day much like any other. The bakery smelled of fresh bread, the sun glinted softly off the windows, and townspeople moved about their routines. Maria had been arranging pastries on the shelves when she noticed a figure standing outside, near the edge of the street. At first, she thought it was another traveler, as people often passed through their town. But as her eyes adjusted and her heart began to quicken, she realized that there was something impossibly familiar about the man who had appeared before her. It was him, the Apache man. Time had changed him slightly. The years had left faint lines on his face, and his movements carried the subtle weight of experience. Yet, when their eyes met, Maria felt as if no time had passed at all. The same intensity, the same quiet warmth, and the same deep understanding were there, as vivid as the night they had first met. Her heart raced, a mixture of disbelief, joy, and anticipation flooding through her. The years of waiting, hoping, and imagining this moment were suddenly brought to life, and she could hardly breathe with the intensity of it. He approached her slowly, with a calm that seemed almost unreal. Maria could hear the soft sounds of his footsteps, see the steady determination in his gaze, and feel the presence of someone who had never left her heart at all. When he finally reached her, he spoke her name in a voice both familiar and deep, and it carried a tenderness that made her knees feel weak. She could not speak at first. Her mind struggled to process the reality of seeing him again after so many years. Yet all at once, words were unnecessary. Their eyes met, and the connection they had shared long ago was alive and whole, unbroken by distance or time. He explained that circumstances had kept him away. Obligations to his family, responsibilities to his community, and personal matters had delayed his return. He had traveled far and had faced challenges that required his attention, yet every day he had thought of her. Every day he had carried the memory of that night in his heart, remembering the way she had looked under the stars, the warmth of her hand in his, and the quiet understanding that had passed between them without words. Maria listened, her heart overflowing with relief and joy, realizing that he had truly never forgotten her. Their reunion was tender, cautious, yet filled with the energy of suppressed emotion finally being released. They walked through the streets together, speaking softly, sharing small smiles, and occasionally pausing as if to make sure this was truly real. Maria noticed the little changes, the way he moved, the slight lines on his face, and the deeper understanding in his eyes, yet beneath it all, he was the same man who had left such a mark on her life so many years ago. It was as though time had only refined their connection, polishing it like a gem until it shone brighter than before. Over the next days, they began to spend more time together, slowly rebuilding their relationship and learning about each other's lives in the years apart. Maria spoke of her work at the bakery, her family, and the small joys she had discovered in everyday life. He shared stories of his travels, his experiences with his tribe, and the lessons he had learned along the way. Every story, every conversation, brought them closer together, reinforcing the bond that had been waiting silently through the years. Maria felt a happiness she had never thought she could experience again, a mixture of relief, excitement, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that love had returned when it was meant to. There were moments of reflection as well. Maria thought about the years they had spent apart, wondering what might have been if he had returned sooner. Yet, she quickly realized that those years had shaped them both, giving depth to their understanding, patience, and appreciation for what they shared. She saw that the waiting, the longing, and the hope had prepared her heart to receive him fully, with gratitude and without fear. He too seemed to carry a similar awareness, and their conversations often touched on the paths they had taken to arrive at this very moment. As they spent more time together, Maria noticed small gestures that reminded her of the man she had met under the stars so long ago. The way he would glance at her when she laughed, the gentle care in his movements, and the subtle attentiveness to her words and feelings, all of it reinforced the connection that had never truly faded. There was no rush between them. Their love was patient, built on years of memory, hope, and now, renewed presence. Each day, they learned to appreciate each other in a way that felt both natural and profound, savoring the small joys of being together without the need for grand gestures. Friends and family soon noticed a change in Maria as well. The quiet longing that had been a part of her for so many years was replaced by a visible glow of happiness. Her smile seemed brighter, her steps lighter, and her presence warmer. The bakery itself felt infused with new energy, as though the joy she carried in her heart had spilled over into every corner of her life. Those around her began to see the power of enduring love, the kind that survives years of absence and emerges even stronger when reunited. Together, Maria and the Apache man began to explore what it meant to build a life after such a long separation. They discussed hopes, dreams, and fears, acknowledging the challenges that might come with blending their worlds. She learned about his culture in greater depth, understanding the values, traditions, and responsibilities that shaped him. He, in turn, learned about her life, the people she cared for, and the experiences that had shaped her into the strong, compassionate woman she had become. It was a slow, deliberate process, filled with curiosity, respect, and deep emotional engagement. Yet, despite the joy, there were also moments of uncertainty. They had lived separate lives for so long, and the world they now shared was both familiar and new. There were questions to be answered, adjustments to be made, and decisions to face. But through it all, their bond remained steadfast. Maria found herself marveling at how love could endure absence, survive time, and re-emerge when the moment was right. She felt a quiet awe at the resilience of the human heart, capable of holding space for someone even when they are far away, trusting that life has its own rhythm. The town itself began to feel alive in a new way for Maria. Every familiar street, shop, and field seemed infused with meaning, now shared with the presence of the one who had always occupied her heart. She walked with him, pointing out her favorite spots, sharing small stories from her past, and showing him the world she had lived in during their years apart. He listened attentively, asking questions, offering his own insights and sometimes just holding her hand in quiet appreciation. Each shared moment, however simple, was a testament to the depth of their connection and the beauty of reunion. As the days turned into weeks, Maria realized that the love she had imagined for so long was no longer just a memory or a dream. It had returned fully, tangibly, and it was stronger than she could have hoped. The fear of loss, the uncertainty of waiting, and the years of longing had all been preparation for this. A reunion that allowed them to fully appreciate each other, to honor the bond that had started under the stars, and to build something lasting together. Their evenings were often spent under the same stars where they had first met, talking quietly, sharing laughter, and simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. Maria felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she had not known was possible. The connection that had once been fleeting had now matured into something steady and profound, a love that was patient, enduring, and resilient. She understood that life had brought them back together not by chance, but by timing and fate, rewarding the years of hope and quiet devotion she had carried in her heart. In these moments, Maria also reflected on how much she had grown. The waiting, the longing, and the hope had not been wasted. They had strengthened her, deepened her empathy, and allowed her to recognize the true value of connection. She realized that love was not only about joy and togetherness. It was about resilience, patience, and trust. And now, with him by her side, she felt ready to embrace the future with confidence, knowing that the bond they shared was real, profound, and unshakable. Together, they began to plan the next steps of their lives, discussing how to blend their worlds, honor their cultures, and continue nurturing the bond that had survived so many years apart. Maria felt a quiet excitement, knowing that the extraordinary night under the stars had not been the end of their story, but the beginning of a journey that would continue, rich with shared experiences, mutual respect, and enduring love. They had been separated by circumstance, yet their hearts had found each other again, proving that true connections are never truly lost, and that love, when genuine, can survive time, distance, and life's challenges. And so, Maria and the Apache man continued their journey together, building a relationship rooted in respect, understanding, and deep emotional intimacy. Their days were filled with ordinary joys, baking together, walking through the fields, sharing meals, and laughing at small, everyday occurrences. Yet beneath the simplicity of these moments was a profound truth, the extraordinary power of a love that had waited, endured, and returned stronger than ever. Maria felt gratitude, joy, and an unshakable sense of fulfillment, knowing that life had finally brought her the reunion she had quietly hoped for all these years. After years of waiting, longing, and hoping, Maria finally found herself living a reality she had only dreamed of for so long. The Apache man, who had left her heart in suspense for years, was now present in her life every day. The reunion had been tender, cautious at first, but the bond they shared had quickly grown stronger with every shared smile, every conversation, and every moment of quiet understanding. The memory of that night under the stars, which had once seemed so distant and fragile, now felt like the foundation of something lasting, something that would shape the rest of their lives. The months following his return were filled with discovery. Maria and the Apache man spent their days learning about each other in the context of the years that had passed. She shared stories of her family, the bakery, and the experiences that had shaped her character and her dreams. He told tales of his travels, his responsibilities to his tribe, and the lessons life had taught him along the way. Each story was a thread that wove them closer together, creating a tapestry of shared understanding and mutual respect. They laughed at their misunderstandings, marveled at their differences, and celebrated the ways in which their experiences complemented one another. Maria noticed how their connection had matured over time. The intensity of that first night was still there, glowing in their interactions, but it had been enriched by patience, experience, and shared reflection. The initial spark had grown into a steady flame, one that warmed their hearts and illuminated their path forward. Each glance carried depth, each touch carried memory, and every conversation carried a richness that only years of longing could produce. They learned to move together comfortably, to anticipate each other's needs, and to appreciate the silent gestures that expressed love in ways words could not. The town, too, noticed the change in Maria. Her quiet longing had transformed into radiant happiness, a glow that touched everyone around her. Friends and neighbors marveled at the way her eyes sparkled and the ease in her laughter. It was clear that her heart had been healed and fulfilled, that the patience she had practiced for years had been rewarded. The bakery, once a place of routine, now carried a special warmth, infused with the joy and energy she radiated. Even simple tasks like kneading dough or arranging pastries were filled with a sense of purpose and delight, as if life itself had opened a new chapter for her. With the Apache man by her side, Maria also began to explore the deeper aspects of his world. She learned about his tribe's customs, the meaning of their symbols, and the responsibilities he carried to his people. She listened with fascination to the stories of his ancestors, the lessons of leadership, and the importance of community. In turn, he immersed himself in her world, understanding the life she had built in her town, the people she loved, and the routines she valued. They found that even though they came from different worlds, the values that mattered most, love, respect, honesty, and care, were shared. This understanding strengthened their bond, making it resilient against challenges and uncertainties. Their evenings were often spent in quiet reflection, walking under the same stars where they had first met. These walks were no longer filled with the nervous anticipation of youth, but with the comfort of familiarity and the joy of connection. Maria would share her thoughts and dreams, and he would respond with care and insight, always listening, always present. The small joys of life, the way the wind rustled the leaves, the song of a distant bird, the cool night air became richer because they shared them together. Every moment, no matter how ordinary, felt extraordinary because it was lived with someone whose heart had always been aligned with hers. In time, the couple began to consider the future seriously. Their love had endured years of waiting, and now it was time to take the next step. They discussed marriage, not as a hurried decision but as a natural progression of their shared journey. Maria thought about the life she had imagined with him, the family she might build, and the continued joy of walking through the world together. He spoke of his hopes for a life where they could honor both their cultures, blending traditions, values, and practices into a shared future. These conversations were filled with care, patience, and excitement, each discussion reinforcing the sense that their love was both enduring and intentional. The wedding itself was a celebration of both cultures, a beautiful blending of tradition and modernity. The ceremony was held outdoors, under the wide sky and the soft light of the afternoon sun. Friends and family from both worlds came together to witness the union, bringing their own joy and blessings. Maria wore a simple, elegant dress, while he wore attire that reflected his Apache heritage. The ceremony was intimate, focused on the promises they made to each other and the love that had survived years of absence. When they exchanged vows, there was a sense of completeness, a quiet acknowledgement that their hearts had waited, endured, and now rejoiced in fulfillment. After the wedding, life settled into a new rhythm. Maria and her husband shared mornings in the bakery, afternoons walking through the hills, and evenings under the stars. They explored the lands he had described to her, traveling together when possible, and sharing in the joy of discovering new places. They learned to navigate the small challenges of daily life with teamwork, humor, and patience, always keeping their shared history in mind. Every moment carried significance because it was rooted in love that had waited for its perfect time. The couple also dreamed of building a family together. They imagined children who would grow up knowing both cultures, learning from the traditions of the Apache tribe and the warmth of Maria's town. They spoke of teaching lessons about patience, respect, and the importance of love that endures beyond circumstances. These dreams were not rushed. They were nurtured slowly, like the careful growth of a tree, ensuring that the roots of their family would be as strong as the love that had brought them together. Maria found joy in seeing her husband integrate into her life, just as he found joy in understanding hers. They shared responsibilities, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through moments of fatigue or frustration. Even disagreements were handled with care, as they had learned that communication and understanding were key to sustaining a bond as deep and enduring as theirs. The love that had begun under the stars had matured into something resilient and sustaining, capable of withstanding the ordinary trials of life, as well as the extraordinary moments of joy and celebration. Over time, they became a symbol of hope and patience for those around them. Friends marveled at the story of their reunion, inspired by the way their love had endured years of absence and returned stronger than ever. Their story was shared quietly, often whispered in conversation, reminding others that true love could survive time, distance, and circumstance. Maria and her husband never boasted about the rarity of their bond. Instead, they lived it humbly and joyfully, allowing their lives to be a testament to the power of enduring love. The years that followed were filled with the richness of shared life. They built a home together, one that reflected both their cultures, values, and dreams. The walls held laughter, the rooms echoed with conversation, and the air carried warmth and comfort. Every detail of their life, from the meals they shared to the stories they told at bedtime, from the work in the bakery to quiet evenings under the stars, became a continuation of the love that had begun long ago. Maria often reflected on how miraculous it was that a single night had led to a lifetime of fulfillment. Even in old age, their bond remained strong. They continued to walk hand in hand, to share laughter and stories, and to support each other in ways both large and small. Maria remembered the years of waiting not with regret, but with gratitude, knowing that those years had strengthened her heart and prepared her for a love that was patient, enduring, and true. The Apache man, too, expressed quietly how those years had allowed him to appreciate her fully, understand her deeply, and cherish the love they shared without distraction or fear. Their children, and later grandchildren, grew up witnessing a love that was steady, kind, and inspiring. Maria and her husband taught them not only the importance of family and tradition, but also the patience and faith required to sustain meaningful connections. Their story became part of the family lore, a tale of love that could endure years, survive distance, and blossom in its own time. It served as a gentle reminder that life's delays were not denials, that patience could yield the richest rewards, and that love, when genuine, could withstand any challenge. Maria often sat quietly in the evenings, reflecting on her journey. She thought of the night under the stars, the years of longing, and the eventual reunion that had brought such joy to her life. She realized that the wait had been worth every moment, every pang of longing, and every whisper of hope. Life had taught her that love was not only about presence, but about resilience, understanding, and the courage to carry a bond through time until it could flourish fully. She smiled softly, knowing that her heart had finally found its home, and that the extraordinary journey of one night of love had become a lifetime of happiness. And so, Maria and the Apache man continued their lives together, walking side by side through every season, every challenge, and every moment of joy. Their love, once a fleeting spark under the stars, had matured into a steady, enduring flame, one that illuminated their lives, their family, and everyone around them. It was a love built on memory, patience, and resilience, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the simplest of ways. A single night, a shared glance, and the quiet hope that love will always find its way home.